Some stories don't just depict power, they resist it. They refuse to accept the inevitability of dominance, of history repeating itself in the same brutal cycles. Instead, they ask, what if we could break free? Babylon 5 is a show deeply concerned with fascism, pain, and the cycles of predator and prey. It explores how systems of oppression persist by retelling the story that might makes right and the strong dominate the weak. Yet, at its core, the series is about breaking these cycles and how we do that. And nowhere is that more evident than in the relationship between the Narn and the Centauri, two civilizations locked in a brutal, centuries-long struggle, one defined by colonialism, rebellion, and the ghosts of history that refuse to fade. The Centauri Republic was a once great empire, a declining but still powerful civilization that masked its decay with nostalgia for past glories.
We were young, proud, fierce, bursting to prove ourselves to each other and to the world. Our starships ruled the spaceways, and our power was rivaled by that of the gods only. Great maker. It was good to be a Centauri then.
The Centauri are clearly coded as Roman Empire and the imperialism that it represented. And the Centauri see themselves as the rightful rulers of the galaxy, the inheritors of civilization, and they justify their expansionist ambitions with self-aggrandizing myths.
Or the first step in restoring our people to their rightful place in the galaxy, depending on who writes the history books. I think it will be us.
The Narn, by contrast, were their victims. The Narn homeworld was occupied and exploited by the Centauri for over a century. Their land was stripped, their culture suppressed, and their people were forced into servitude, slavery, and faced numerous genocide attempts. Though the Narn eventually fought a long, bloody rebellion that drove the Centauri away before the start of the series, they emerged from the conflict hardened and vengeful, defining themselves in opposition to their former oppressors.
I will confess that I look forward to the day when we have cleansed the universe of the Centauri and carved their bones into little flutes for Narn children. This is a dream I have.
When we first meet the Narn in Babylon 5, they are often framed as an aggressive, militaristic upstart race, eager to expand their influence in the galaxy. Their actions are frequently depicted as ruthless, seizing territory, arming insurgents, and exacting brutal revenge on the Centauri whenever possible.
The attack on Ragesh 3 by our forces. Just found out about it myself. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation.
What reasonable explanation is there for the slaughter of unarmed civilians?
Curious, we wondered the same thing when you invaded our world. The wheel turns, does it not, Ambassador?
We should have wiped out your kind when we had the chance.
What happened? Run out of small children to butcher?
To outsiders, particularly the humans in the show as well as the audience watching it, the Narn appear dangerous and unpredictable, driven more by hatred and anger than strategy. We see this very early on in Season 1 of Babylon 5 with the character of Jakar, who is often framed in the series as a villain at the start. Someone who is pushing too far, too angry, manipulative.
It's our turn now! One night you'll wake up and find our teeth at your throat. Sleep well, Ambassador. Sleep lightly.
But as the series moves on, we start to see that Jakar actually has much more depth to him, having a poet's heart even very early in the series.
There are things in the universe billions of years older than either of our races. They are vast, timeless, and if they are aware of us at all, it is as little more than ants, and we have as much chance of communicating with them as an ant has with us. We know. We've tried. And we've learned that we can either stay out from underfoot or be stepped on.
The Narn are not conquerors by nature. They are a people who have endured over a century of brutal occupation, forced servitude, and cultural erasure at the hands of the Centauri. Their militarism is not rooted in unchecked ambition, but in a desire to reassert their identity and the need to ensure they are never subjugated again. The galaxy views them as warlike because they refuse to be weak, because every step they take into the stars is a defiant assertion of their right to exist. What appears as cruelty is, in their eyes, justice, a long overdue reckoning for the suffering they endured. Yet their violence also brings with it more pain. And so as the series progresses, Babylon 5 challenges the notion that vengeance alone can secure true freedom, revealing how the Centauri, even in their decline, manipulate this cycle to reassert their dominance. By building a racialized framing of the Narn as inherently violent and primitive, the Centauri justify their own brutality as the actions of a civilized power containing a dangerous threat, even saying that they are benevolently trying to civilize the Narn.
A provisional ruling council appointed by my government will take up the responsibility of rebuilding a more civilized Narn government as a colony of the greater Centauri Republic.
In doing so, they not only excuse their past atrocities, but their current and ongoing ones, and also ensure that the Narn remain trapped in a struggle that prevents them from fully reclaiming their agency and allow the Centauri to justify their exploitation of the Narn people. The series forces the audience to confront the understanding that fighting for liberation requires violence, but also to understand how the narrative of that violence is used by oppressors to perpetuate control, especially by colonizing powers. Eventually, during Season 2 of the show, the character of Londo, the ambassador to Babylon 5, uses his connections with the Shadows, mysterious Eldritch beings, watch the show, it's interesting, to reignite the Centauri Republic decaying ambitions by having them take over the Narn homeworld again, reigniting their imperialist and expansionist desires, by once again putting the Narn back under their boot. And it's here where we start to really begin to see the shift in G'Kar, as he stands back up to the Centauri.
No dictator, no invader can hold an imprisoned population by force of arms forever. There is no greater power in the universe than the need for freedom. Against that power, governments and tyrants and armies cannot stand. The Centauri learned this lesson once. We will teach it to them again. Though it take 1,000 years, we will be free.
And we understand what the show has been trying to say all along. Our perspective of his people as the ones causing too many problems was because how they have been framed by the Centauri. The show has been making clear that our view of oppressed people as uppity, as speaking out too much, was something that our society often makes people who push back against the status quo and how they're oppressed to be seen as.
They must know that our voice can still be heard in the streets in their sleep. We must keep reminding the others that we exist. We are still here. If they forget about us, then we are truly beyond rescue.
And so, as the Narn start to fight back against the Centauri and push back against them, we start to understand the perspective of the victims. We understand the Narn now not just as aggressors, but as survivors making impossible choices in their fight against oppression. Their struggle is not one of simple revenge now, but of necessity, each act of resistance a desperate attempt to ensure they are never subjugated again, no matter the cost. We also begin to understand the culpability of the Centauri, how their entire society is built on downcasting the other, of taking advantage of someone else. Their empire was in complete decline until they reignited through desire to expand, their manifest destiny encapsulated. Even those of the Centauri who are appalled by the actions of their government are shown to still be culpable because they still take part in that society and don't actively fight back. In one of the most powerful moments of the series, Veer, Londo's often naive and well-meaning assistant, steps into an elevator shortly after the Centauri's brutal genocide and re-enslavement of G'Kar's people. As he faces G'Kar, he awkwardly starts to speak but quickly falters, realizing that no words could possibly bridge the chasm between them as he looks down G'Kar's unending stare. He tries to apologize.
I'm sorry.
Dead, 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 dead. How do you apologize to them?
I can't.
Then I cannot forgive.
In that moment, Veer begins to emotionally understand what he represents. Not just himself, but the weight of Centauri cruelty, the privilege of being on the side of the oppressors.
and the impossible gulf between his intentions and the suffering his people have inflicted.
It's important that this scene between G'Kar and the character of Vir is not G'Kar showing necessarily anger at Vir. He has anger, but it's G'Kar just pointing out the fact that he cannot forgive Vir, because Vir cannot atone for all of those dead, and G'Kar, as a result, cannot forgive because of it. The wound is continually being reopened over and over and over again. But eventually, and I won't spoil this for you because you should watch the show, the Centauri are eventually defeated and pushed back towards their own homeworld. And this is ultimately what I wanted to get to, because a key moment for Babylon 5, in its ability to showcase how we break the cycles that we are told to continue to follow of oppression and dominance, might makes right, occurs near the end of the series in the episode The Long Night, when G'Kar, now a leader of his people, urges the Narn not to take revenge on the Centauri, who have been defeated and have their homeworld in ruin.
You will be the instrument of our vengeance. With you directing us, we will finally destroy the Centauri.
You have just tossed someone off that throne. Would you put another in his place so quickly? The Kari spoke with many equal voices, not the one voice of a single leader.
We need strength to lead us, fire to forge us. We saw that in the Centauri, learned that from them.
Then you have learned the wrong lessons.
The Narn have won their freedom again, and many want to repay their former oppressors with the same brutality that they endured. The Centauri occupation left deep scars, and the desire to enact retribution is understandable.
Not only that, but the Narn in this scene seek strength through the very means that once enslaved them: violence, domination, and the rule of strong men. In their quest for security and vengeance, they risk mirroring the Centauri's own might makes right philosophy, believing that only through power and ruthless authority can they protect themselves from future subjugation.
But G'Kar, who has endured humiliation, torture, and slavery, refuses to let hatred define his people. He argues that vengeance will not bring them justice, only another cycle of pain.
I will not take the throne. If the Kari is restored, I will take my place among them, but that's all. I did not fight to remove one dictator just to become another myself.
But the Centauri
Are a lost people! They are to be pitied. They are already on a course for self-destruction. They do not need help from us. We need to redress our wounds, help our people, rebuild our cities.
We must strike back!
No.
I never thought you a coward, G'Kar. We suffered and died during their occupation. Where were you? What have you endured?
What have I endured?
His call for restraint is not about forgiveness, nor is it about forgetting or not holding the Centauri to account. Instead, it's about refusing to become what they once hated. It's about choosing to build something and focus on that, focus on rebuilding Narn and what they need, rather than continuing destruction back. Again, it's not about holding Centauri not responsible, but in many ways they are their own worst victims. Later, in one of the series' most powerful moments, G'Kar personally forgives Londo Mollari, the man who set into motion the second colonization of the Narn by the Centauri Republic earlier in the show. And this forgiveness is not simple, nor is it meant to absolve Londo of his crimes.
Understand that I can never forgive your people for what they did to my world. My people can never forgive your people. But I can forgive you.
G'Kar makes it very clear that his forgiveness is his alone. He does not speak for the Narn as a whole towards Londo. His people have every right to hate the Centauri and every right to hate Londo, and they are not obligated to ever forgive, nor is it quite possible that they ever will be able to. But in Londo, G'Kar sees a man who has taken responsibility for his actions, directly apologizing and acknowledging that he was the man who caused the harm.
I'm sorry, G'Kar. I'm sorry.
A man who has suffered under the same cycle of violence that he once helped perpetuate as well.
You're not sorry for what you did! You're just sorry that you got caught! That you almost destroyed your home world because of it.
That's not true.
Yeah, then prove it. Just a word, Malari.
Londo, too, becomes a prisoner of the empire that he sought to restore, manipulated and controlled by forces beyond his understanding, and eventually becomes the emperor of a decaying empire, trapped and controlled by those above him in a decaying society that is just burning itself out on its own embers of anger and destruction. G'Kar has moved beyond seeking hatred and vengeance to something more profound, not reconciliation, but an acceptance of the past without allowing it to dictate his future.
Long after we are gone, our voices will linger in these walls for as long as this place remains.
Londo, in turn, seeks redemption even as he realizes he will never fully escape the consequences of his choices. The show refuses easy answers. It does not suggest that peace comes from pretending the past never happened. Instead, it argues that true liberation comes from breaking the cycles that perpetuate pain.
It is said that the future is always born in pain. The history of war is the history of pain. If we are wise, what is born of that pain matures into the promise of a better world, because we learn that we can no longer afford the mistakes of the past.
The Narn and Centauri, bound by history, stand as one of the show's most complex depictions of oppression and its consequences. Their story is one of loss and resistance, of vengeance and redemption, and ultimately of the difficult, painful choices required to try to build something new. Stories have power, not just to reflect the world as it is, but to imagine something different, to resist, to break cycles, to carve out new narratives for ourselves. Babylon 5 is just one of those stories, and this video is just a fragment of a much larger conversation.
Greater than the death of flesh is the death of hope, the death of dreams. Against this peril we can never surrender. The future is all around us, waiting in moments of transition to be born in moments of revelation. No one knows the shape of that future or where it will take us. We know only that it is always born in pain.
If you want more, this is a companion piece to my video on Stories That Resist, where I explore how fictions fight back against narratives of cycles of domination. And if you're ready for a much deeper dive on Babylon 5, my friend and co-host Vera Wild and I just finished the Jumpgate podcast, our show where we went through every single episode of Babylon 5, unraveling its themes, its politics, its heartbreak, and an alarming amount of two trans women platonically hitting on each other. So go and check that out if you so wish. And to be clear, Babylon 5 has so much more. There's so much more nuance just to the Narn and Centauri storyline in the show. And the show is not without its faults. It's got a lot of propaganda too. So know that going in, but it is a fantastic show about this exact dynamic, about trying to forge something different and new for our future.